All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Happy to share the Perimeter Medical Imaging AI story with you all, and thanks to Channel Check for having us at their conference here at NobleCon. Before I dive in, just a quick reminder that I will be making forward-looking statements throughout the presentation, and I direct you to our filings on SEDAR for a complete discussion and analysis of the risks facing the organization. So Perimeter Medical Imaging AI is an early stage medical device company, and we're driven to transform cancer surgery. And we're doing that with ultra high resolution and real-time advanced imaging tools, serving unmet needs really across the continuum of care in cancer, in surgical oncology. The first unmet need that we're addressing with our flagship product today is called intraoperative margin assessment. So in the case of a solid cancer surgery, we'll talk about breast lumpectomies throughout most of the deck, the surgeon would remove that tumor, and today they send the tumor to a pathology lab, which can take anywhere from 2 days to over a week to examine that specimen, and they're looking for any cancer cells at the edge, at the perimeter of the tissue. They find cancer cells at the perimeter. It's called a positive margin, and the risk of cancer coming back for that patient doubles. So instead of accepting that risk, the surgeon would call the patient, have them come back for another operation. Surgeon goes back in, removes additional tissue, and starts the cycle over again. Unfortunately, about 25% of the time, patients have to come back for at least one more operation. Sometimes they go on to a radical mastectomy right after that. Significant costs and complications facing both the payers and the patients in this situation. So some highlights for Perimeter. We're a commercial stage organization. We announced our first commercial placement with our flagship S-Series OCT, that's the surgery series OCT, late last year, and excited to be in this commercialization phase for that flagship product right now, continuing to build our commercial organization, our field-based sales force, and on and on. Next for Perimeter is an AI enhancement that will overlay the images generated by that S-Series OCT. That is the Perimeter B-Series. This is when we move into a breast-specific indication from the FDA, and that B-Series device was granted breakthrough device designation by the FDA. So really excited about what that unlocks from a regulatory pathway for us, optimistic about the potential MCIT reimbursement program from CMS for breakthrough designated devices as well, and we're at the clinical validation phase of that technology. The team behind Perimeter, we're all exclusive medical device medical device background profiles. I myself joined after a long career with Stryker, sometime with Smith & Nephew. And what I can say about why I joined Perimeter is when I was leaving Stryker, I was the head of finance for their surgical business, and just on the back end of a couple of different breast cancer acquisitions, one being a company called Novadac and another being a company called Invuity, next on my technology to acquire list was something to solve intraoperative margin assessment. Our sales force and our customers were constantly saying, this is the holy grail of breast lumpectomies. If you get a technology that can solve this problem in the right way, you've got a real winner. So I had done a lot of diligence on the space way back then. Several years later, when the Perimeter opportunity came across my desk, I could see that they have a business model, they have unique technology that's solving the problem in a differentiated way, and it's a scalable platform technology that we can take into other oncology applications and really across the continuum of care in surgical oncology. So alluding to that, so beyond the intraoperative breast cancer market that we're in today, we have a $3.7 billion total addressable market across other solid cancer types, upstream in radiology as we think about biopsies, and downstream in pathology as well. And this is from a razor blade business model. So the capital unit you see here on the slide today is placed at the hospital, and it's a recurring revenue model with a single-use consumable device that can only be used once per procedure. And then most recently, from a balance sheet perspective, in January we announced the closing of around a $50 million private placement that was led by Social Capital with just over $43 million of that private placement. So a great opportunity to have a differentiated investor on the cap table for us. If I describe the partnership with Social Capital, was kind of convenient because, they're predominantly tech investors moving into life sciences and healthcare. We, with our S-Series device, have been a medical device company. We're medical device management and board, but then we're moving into the tech arena with our artificial intelligence. So a great opportunity to plug into their network of portfolio companies and have their expertise guiding us as we really look to scale up that value creation lane for Perimeter. So to frame the problem a little bit better, breast cancer now is the most common cancer worldwide. Unfortunately, 1 in 8 women in their lifetime will be diagnosed with breast cancer, and about 300,000 diagnoses happen in the U.S. annually, where we're cleared for market today. And as I mentioned, if positive margins are found after the procedure, the local recurrence risk doubles for those patients. So they come back for another operation. Those patients who come back for another operation cost around $16,000 in just hard dollars and cents of additional treatment cost. And so you've got 1 in 4 patients coming back for a $16,000 cost. It's averaging $4,000 of cost per patient in avoidable costs. And that's just the hard dollars and cents. Nearly half of those operations come with some form of complication. So think things like pain management, surgical site infections, other hospital-acquired conditions, poor cosmesis for the patient, and as we think about quality of survivorship in breast cancer surgery particularly, cosmetic outcomes are very important. So enabling the surgeon to be precise with the tissue they're removing is a big value add for the surgeon and for the patient. So, again, I'll just reiterate, it's one of those technologies that kind of what I describe as the triple bottom line for medical devices. It's good for patients, good for providers, and good for payers. So to double click on the workflow here, so today's current standard of care, you see at the top of this slide, surgeon removes a tumor, they send it to a pathology lab, which can take anywhere from 2 to over 7 days to provide this gold standard, pathology, histopathology slide you see here with the pink and purple, staining. And that dark purple circle you see at the edge of the tissue there, that's called ductal carcinoma in situ. That is a positive margin, and in today's world, this patient has to come back for a second operation. Future state, with Perimeter's technology, the surgeon would remove the tumor in the OR, outside of the sterile field, place that tumor on our machine, and generate an image like you see on the bottom half of this slide. It's the same piece of tissue that you're looking at on the top half of the slide, only the surgeon sees that ductal carcinoma in situ in real time and can take additional action on the patient right away in the OR, thus avoiding all those costs and complications from the second procedure that I just talked about. So the overall platform, I mentioned it's a razor blade business model, so you have the capital unit on the left here. Our underlying technology is called optical coherence tomography. It's very mature technology widely used in fields like ophthalmology and cardiology. We've innovated it, and our intellectual property is making it wide field. So if you think in the field of ophthalmology, you're scanning a smooth surface, 1 by 1 centimeter retina, easy to immobilize the patient, the whole patient's head as you're taking a scan, pretty easy to acquire the images. What we've done is created a system that can take 1 by 1 centimeter probe and turn it into 9 by 9 centimeters to handle a large excised tumor specimen like a breast lumpectomy that's very fatty, tends to be difficult to manipulate, shapeless in a lot of ways, and a lot of challenges with handling those specimens. So to enable the microscopic level resolution scan that we get with our capital unit there, we have that single-use consumable device that's called a tissue Immobilizer. And what that does in a very gentle, diffused manner, immobilizes that tissue so you don't have any movement artifact on those microscopic level images you're looking at on the screen. And it also maintains the shape so that the surgeon can make their clinical decision, because they really care about how far away from the edge of the tissue they see the cancer. So a lot of intellectual property going into that tissue Immobilizer. And then from a new user onboarding perspective, this technology has been in development since 2013. So we've acquired a library of images compared to histopathology, so surgeons can prepare themselves and get onboarded with the technology very quickly across several different tissue types. So if I'm a surgeon who has a young patient with dense breasts that is diagnosed with biopsy for DCIS, I can go into this Atlas image library and see exactly what I should be looking for prior to the operation. And then, as I alluded to earlier, in clinical development, we have our Imageassist AI software that really effectively provides kind of a Google Maps, if you will, within the images. So the surgeon would scan the image, the machine learning algorithm processes that image and flags the areas of the specimen that are suspicious for having cancer cells in them. And that Imageassist AI software, we're at the third stage of the project, which is clinical validation, but as I alluded to, it's been in development for quite some time. So the first phase of that project was to collect additional images to further train and validate the algorithm. And this overall project is funded in part by the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas. So, a great government-funded body. You can imagine the level of diligence that they would do around the business model, intellectual property, technology, all of that stuff. And exiting stage 1 of the project, we achieved a 0.94 AUC, which in artificial intelligence language, that's a 94% predictivity measure. So the algorithm can sort the images and display only the suspicious images with 94% accuracy. And to give you kind of a benchmark within the industry, there are other, on the detection side, other technologies using AI that have a 0.85 AUC that are becoming pretty much standard of care in that side of the business. So I'd say, it certainly exceeded our internal expectations, and I would say it's, industry leading from an AI perspective. And then in between the development of the algorithm in stage 1 and launching of the pivotal trial for clinical validation, we've done what we call a reader study with all the surgeons that are participating in the pivotal study. So as we think about opportunity to de-risk the performance in the pivotal study, this is a great example. And we were able to show those surgeons offline reads of the data so that they can effectively take a test on the software before actually participating in the pivotal study, and we know that they're meeting a level of proficiency that we desire prior to enrolling live patients in the study. So we announced that we began enrolling late last year. We have really a laundry list of top-notch investigators participating in the study. You can see Dr. Thompson here on this slide as our principal investigator across the study, but other folks like Dr. Richard Fine was our first clinical investigator to start enrolling patients. He happens to be the chair of the Coding and Reimbursement Committee for the American Society of Breast Surgeons, so a great investigator to have participating. The chairwoman of the Research Committee for the American Society of Breast Surgeons, Dr. Lee Wilkie, up at the University of Wisconsin, and then a number of, kind of a mix of community hospitals and academic facilities participating in the study from there. So we're really excited. We're off and running on patient enrollment. Expect to be fully enrolled late this year with data supporting a marketing application to the FDA for a de novo market clearance coming at the very tail end of this year or early next year. So from a business model perspective, a microeconomics perspective for the customer, I alluded to some of these figures earlier. We've got about 20 to 25% of patients coming back for a reoperation that costs $16,000. So you're averaging $4,000 cost per patient. And what we've gone to customers with today is to say, listen, before the AI comes, you can pretty confidently rely on avoiding half of your reoperations. We have data that would suggest it's much higher than that, but for the sake of being under-promising and over-delivering, we say you can avoid half. So we cut a $4,000 cost down to $2,000, thus creating $2,000 worth of value. And effectively, we split that value with the hospital. So it costs $1,000 to acquire Perimeter's technology per procedure, and then the hospital would net that $1,000 of savings. So it's really quite an elegant model where the hospital's cash outflow match their operational savings at the same time. And then as we scale that up, there's about 200,000 breast lumpectomies happening in the U.S. annually. So you're talking a $200 million market in just our initial addressable market. And where we're at today, before the AI comes, we're focused on ultrasound imaging savvy surgeons, so what we call the early adopter market, or kind of the train the trainer phase, and that's about the top 500 institutions in the US. So our immediate addressable market with the technology that we have cleared for market today is that $75 million mark there, and that's kind of a bottoms up build. And so as you see on the bottom half of the slide, kind of the same thing from a top-down view. So really we only need to get to 20 to 30% procedure penetration to get to some meaningful revenue numbers in the 50 to 75 million range. So on that, our marketing and commercialization strategy, so I mentioned it earlier, we're focused on those early adopters today. And that's again about the 20 to 30% procedure penetration. We're active in the pivotal trial on the clinical validation for the AI. This gives us another 8 reference sites around the country that new potential users can visit and get familiar with the AI on. And then post AI is when we really expand the target market to the rest of the surgeons, that other 70 to 80% of surgeons that might do fewer lumpectomies, they might not use as much imaging in their technology, and they really stand to benefit from the artificial intelligence flattening the learning curve for them. And then as we move beyond, that's when we can start thinking about the other tissue types, AI applications for, you can see on the pie here, colorectal, prostate, lung, really any solid cancer has this same margin assessment challenge. And then as I mentioned earlier, interventional radiology, the same challenges from radiology to pathology exist for biopsies, and then downstream for pathology. While it's the gold standard, unfortunately it's a sampling technique, and they really tend to only look at about 16% of the margin in pathology. So giving them technology that can give them a gross pathological assessment, helping them direct their samples to the right 16% is a big value add for those folks as well. And so, just another, a deeper dive on those value streams. So this initial target market, 500 high volume hospitals. We have a sales team, a total commercial team of around 20 individuals out there calling on these hospitals today. Then the breast cancer AI software, we expect to be on market kind of this time next year, early next year. And then throughout this year, we'll be really focusing on starting to expand into other tissue types and other parts of the workflow. And then as we think from a capital markets perspective, I tend to say we are at the intersection of really 2 or 3 of the most exciting trends in medical devices. We're women's health, which is one of the fastest growing segments, has been for recent history in medical devices. We have big data or computer assisted surgery, and we're at the intersection of those. And then what we, kind of an emerging space is intraoperative visualization. So you can see, the GE acquisition of BK Medical here recently, they came in their press release announced, we believe that intraoperative visualization is the next phase for imaging. It's just kind of convenient as you move from, pre-op imaging for detection and diagnosis into the OR and then on beyond. So, really kind of public company comps anywhere from 10 to significantly higher times revenue. And if you think back to our slide there on what it would take for us to get to 50, 75 million in revenue, we're not too far away from being able to achieve some pretty meaningful numbers there. So with that, I'll open it up for questions. Greg? Definitely, yeah. So the question was, in the hardware development, moving the off-the-shelf OCT technology to wide-field OCT. And it was a very difficult technological problem to solve, I would say, because you're dealing with tissue that's not smooth. You have little cracks and crevices in the lumpectomies that have been removed, a lot of challenges handling the specimen, as I talked about earlier, and really optimizing the wavelength and the scan for that precision within the clinical decision-making space. So, very difficult, a lot of intellectual property that went into it. And I would say, yeah, we will continue to optimize that technology going forward. I think we have some pretty exciting, opportunities in biopsy or in pathology as well, where we can, remove some of the cost out of that specimen because the precision that they need is lower. Or say, for example, putting it at the end of a probe so you can examine the tissue within the body still in vivo instead of ex vivo like we are today. So we'll continue to work on that and continue to optimize that technology for faster, better scans as we go forward. Yeah, the question was if we'll continue to see improvements on the artificial intelligence, and the answer is definitely yes. I think we've got two different avenues there, and you touched on both of them. So there are fundamental structural changes to the algorithm that continue to improve the performance as we grow our data set. And I think this is a classic machine learning situation. As you give it more data, the smarter and more accurate it gets. So we feel really confident in our sensitivity side of the equation. Now we really want to optimize the specificity side, and I think more data will continue to do that and continue to help us there. And as we expand beyond and get more data, there's also optimizing the algorithm for the different types of breast cancer that you may see. So we talked a little bit about DCIS in the slides here, but also invasive ductal carcinoma could be its own standalone algorithm that works in conjunction with the DCIS. So, lots of opportunities for improvement, and that's where we're really excited about the Social Capital partnership here, because they can bring some heavyweight artificial intelligence expertise to the organization and really drive that forward. And then we're really scratching the surface from an AI perspective, being a descriptive algorithm that's really just interpreting data. As we, evolve and move beyond, we should be thinking about predictive opportunities and personalized medicine and really helping the path of care for that patient after the operation. So you move from treatment to analysis and beyond. So, yep. Any other questions? Okay, well, with that, I'll wrap things up. Again, here on the slide, you can see for more information, we're at perimetermed.com, and you can follow us on all the different social media platforms, from LinkedIn to Twitter to Facebook, to see the action out in the field and stay up to date. Thank you.